Noodinensikwe mioma Mekanonk nindu dame Tawanish Kuniging in Dunjaba Dream of Wild Health mioma Indanoki Ajigwan Diayawan and Mamia o Kiwiwaba Magima Neziwama Nupaming. You can look around here and see we are out in the woods. Gemago Giwiwaba Mag Manomen mi oma. You could see right here, this is the wild rice. May was a given a manongo, who comas the non, we piajayagama, we wabanda ag, an India, manomen. So you know, a long time ago, just like today, people will go out to look for the wild rice. And back in the day, it would be our grandmothers. The grandmothers, the women usually were the ones that would look for the rice. And even today, I know I look for rice. I know Pebama Benes, O Mama, one, Ogima Gwenebek, she'll go and look for it. And what she'll do, you know, is she'll run her hands up along the rice and then look to see what's in her palm of her hand. If you see the kernels of the rice, then the rice might be ready. It's past the time, you go past the time that it has its little flowers. So rice is a type of a grass. And as it's growing, you'll see first it starts to come up to the surface of the water. Then it lays flat along the top of the water. Then it stands up. Then it starts to grow taller. And then you're going to start to see the flowers. And then after the flowers, you'll start to see the young seeds. The young seeds will be milky and white. So if you break them, you break a seed and you see it's still white and milky, it's not ready yet. You want to make sure that the rice is falling so you don't injure the rice in the rice beds. So back in the day, you would have usually a grandma that would watch out and let people know when the rice was ready to be picked. Because before you pick the rice, you've got to binda kujige. Buchigo binda kujige. So you have to do an offering ceremony. So you want to make sure that people are invited, and before anybody has any of the rice, you're going to do a thank you ceremony that Mother Earth and the Creator has made sure that the rice has come back and that we're doing things in a respectful way. So we're asking permission to gather. I've heard people say, when we come out here, we're coming to Manidu Negandizid O Gitiganing. So we're coming to the Creator's garden, the leading spirit's garden, the Creator's garden, because we see it. They're so generous to us. Definitely in the way that you're thinking in the language. When you're thinking about food, you're thinking about the Awesiag, the wild ones, and the Awakanag, the enslaved ones. So for us here, this is wild rice. But sometimes you will come upon paddy rice, which does not grow where it wants to grow. It's brought in and is forced to grow. So I was told as a young girl, always try to eat the wild foods, because you take on that spirit, and that spirit it's a free spirit. It's not an enslaved spirit. And what happens is when the rice is growing where it wants to grow, then you know that the soil is ready, that the area is clean enough, that it's going to produce the seeds that are edible for you, that your body's going to take in. It's not being forced. It's not being subjected to GMO or genetically modified organisms, scientific technology. It's not being as subjected to pesticides and herbicides. So we want to make sure that we get those wild foods in our body, because not only is it cleaner, has more food value, because the the ground is rich enough and clean enough and not used up, so we're getting food value that sustains our bodies. So the teachings are, when we go out here and we gather, we always put our thank yous down. You're going to put your thank you down with your sema. So most of you know that we always offer our thank yous before we do anything. So if you're being a Kujige, you have your thank you feast first before you even go out. And then you're going to offer your tobacco and talk to the plants before you're even thinking about doing anything else. And it gives you a chance to really appreciate that they're just as alive as we are. I want to talk a little bit about climate change. And things are changing, so we really need to watch what's going on with the plants. Like, be in touch with them. The teachings that I received was that they remember their original instructions, just like the animals. They're our elders. They were here before us, and we need to be paying attention to what they're doing, because they can show us how to cope with changes. Today I brought some what they call southern wild rice. This is a subspecies of wild rice that used to grow quite a bit further south from here. And as you see, this is very, very tall. So this is a race of wild rice that used to grow down south of Iowa, and it's been coming up the Mississippi River. And pretty soon it's going to be found in the same places that we find the northern subspecies. A subspecies is exactly the same as a race. So this wild rice right here could probably produce fertile seeds with this wild rice right here. So if you see, here's the wild rice. Here's the seeds of the wild rice up on the top. And these are called your bawa amug. So if you're gonna bawa you're gonna tap. Oh, did you see that? A little bit fell down. So normally, if we were really ricing, oh, there goes some. You see, a little bit goes tapping in. But you know, we're very late in the season, so most of the rice is gone. But you would bend the wild rice and tap, tap. Oh, see it? There's some fallen yet. Tap, tap, tap.
Anine Shinakasawag?
Bawa amug. Bawa amug. Kiwi bawa. Kiwi bawa Kiwi bawa Mio kea. Mio kea. Kiwi bawa Kiwi bawa Mio kea. Kiwi wamandano o?
Yeah. Great.
So just because I'm talking about this beautiful gift of food. We always want to thank our food, because when you thank it, it comes closer to you. When you ignore it, it's like, oh, you guys don't need me anymore, I'll leave. So that was the teaching that I had, and you'll see that some of that is actually happening. So remember to punkadana, get the same on. Let it go, release your tobacco. And when you do that, you're going to ask, Adapadamawishin, please accept this tobacco. Keep punkadana. We punkadana, same on. So for me, I'm putting this tobacco down. I'm offering it to the water, you know, and for the rice here, for the spirit keeper of the rice. So you want to be always thinking about that we have helpers around us all the time. Like you would have ones that are different than the ones I have. And you know, in English you might think of that as like, oh, guardian angels. Or you might think of it in Ojibwe as Indino-Taganug, the ones that are listening to me and speaking to me. So the ones that are listening to you and speaking to you, the thing that you do is you got to get quiet enough to listen to what they say. So after you've knocked your rice and you fill up your canoe with rice, then you've got to process it, and it takes a lot of work. Well, people will say, I don't want to work. I just want to sit here and get my food. Well, if we don't move our bodies, we're not going to stay alive. We've got to move, we've got to exercise, we've got to find different ways of stretching and moving and keeping active. So you might say, well, gee, I want it easy and I just want to sit somewhere and move my thumbs. Well, you're not going to stay alive because your body has to move. So things to think about is you come out and you say, gee, it's kind of cold. I don't want to be cold. Well, yeah, you learn how to be cold. Learn how to appreciate being cold. Learn how to appreciate, oh, gee, this year the rice is in really shallow water. I have to push super hard. And that's the absolute truth. This year, when you ganda kiigeyang, when we are ganda kiige, when we're pulling through the rice, you're gonna have to work hard. It's not easy because the canoe bottom's rubbing against the muck, and you really have to push hard. So you have to think of it in terms of, I'm building up strength so I can continue to be on this earth. I can continue to experience this Manobima Diziwin. I get to continue to experience this good life. Aha. This is when I'm really glad it showed up, because you see we're right here by rice, and this little blue flower right here, in English we call it great blue lobelia, and the old name for it is Indian tobacco. So instead of nicotine, it has lobeline in it, and people would use it just like tobacco, you know, so it does have some of that same experience. Here's a good, if you get a close-up of this, you'll see it has the 3 teeth going downwards. You got to make sure you have that one. The seeds are getting ready right now, and when you see those seeds, they're going to look just like the little tiny Nicotiana rustica, which is the tobacco that our people traded and traded and traded. They think for the last 9,000 years we've been trading the tobacco seeds that went from father to son to father to son to father to son. And this is a similar plant, the blue lobelia, only it's lobeline instead of nicotine. So even so, you might say, well, gee, Nicotiana rustica, that Indian tobacco, it couldn't have been very strong. Wrong. The Indian tobacco is really strong. The stuff where the seeds have been passed on. But they don't have any formaldehyde or poisons put in there like a cigarette tobacco. So in a little while, we'll go and see some other plants that you can use to make your own Kenekenic, Ghene, to mix things up. That's where that word Kenekenic comes from. Now, I kind of hate to give this one away because some of these plants, you're really expected to receive specific tobacco for specific medicines. So every single plant has its gift of food, utility, medicine, or breath. And they all give breath. If they're green, they're given oxygen. So if you see one like this, now you know the seeds are ready. There goes the seeds. They have little bitty seeds again. This is the time of year to collect these seeds. So the wind would come by and spread these seeds. And you look here, you can see how the plant looks. This plant is really a powerful, powerful plant. So it's used to take away pain and fever, to heal bones. And twice I've seen people use this one. When you go beyond the biology of the plant, you might say, oh yeah, there's all sorts of good biology in this plant that helps for pain and fever and bone issues. If you go to working with the spirit of the plant, so you might think of it this way. Back in the day, people would say, oh, I'm just going to work with the biology of the plant, or I'm just going to work with the spirit of the plant. That's not really how we used to do it. You'd work with both. So nowadays there's very few people that work just with the spirit of the plant. The spirit of the plant, they have a spirit just like me, just like you. And those spirits can be really strong and really helpful. So I know of people twice that have used this plant to heal broken bones within 4 days. But if you're going to do that, you have to work with the spirit of the plant. Miskwa bimesh mio o gemago giwine naman miskwa bimak. You might call it miskwa bimak. If you look at it, red willow is another name for it. Cornus sericea is the scientific name of it. If you went to a landscaper, they'd say red osier dogwood. So it's native to here. There's different kinds of mitigo asema. So what that means is stick tobacco, and they're usually blends. There is a blend that I've been teaching for a number of years that are always the inner bark of the red willow. So if you can see, it's red. Now if you want to find its relatives, because there's one blend that I've been teaching it's from Mississauga, Ghene, Mille Lacs, and it's 4 different kinds of dogwood. So this right here, you go like, gee, that's such a pretty plant. I'm going to take one leaf. So I'm going to release some tobacco. Now, it's really important to ask for it to be accepted. This plant doesn't have to accept it, so it doesn't have to give its gift. And we hear that more with domesticated plants. The exact same wording in Ho-Chunk is used when you gather like corn, beans, or squash. You ask, I'm releasing my tobacco. Will you accept this tobacco? Now, I was told if you just go like, I'm taking these plants, it's almost like if someone took your children, or even when it's your seed, when you're doing seed, it's almost like rape. So it's important to talk to this being as a living being and think about, I'm not gonna assault this being because it's giving a beautiful gift. So I offered tobacco, and then I'm gonna take a leaf, and this tobacco, this red willow tobacco, sometimes people use it just straight red willow inner bark. In fact, a lot of elders, that's what they want for in their opogan, binjai. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you to see when you make sure you have a dogwood, it has spider web like veins. So see that? See those veins? The dogwoods always have those. If I pull it apart, you see it really looks like spider webs. And the teaching that I received about that is it's to remind us of when we were lowered down from the sky world, that we were lowered on that cord from that spider that was watching Pugginogishik in the sky and was lowering us down using that spider web. It's really strong. So that's a reminder of that. You have to ask your family when your family collects it. If you're Cree or Six Nations, they often, I've heard of people collecting in the summertime. So when you get it in the summertime, it peels really easy, but then it dries hard, and you have to use like a way to crush it down to make it more usable. Or you could use like a coffee grinder or something like that. A lot of times for Ojibwe and Dakota folks and Lakota folks, they also use it. The chan, sha means bark, red. And here you can see why they call it bark, red. It's very red, but in the summertime, it changes to a green color. And some people will say that those are the women's colors in the lodge, is the red and green. Well, if you're going to use this as your tobacco, you don't use the leaves, and you don't use you can use the outside bark, but the stuff that really is important is the inside bark. So you're going to remove that. You can scrape, depending on your family again, scrape up. If you're removing the outside part, I know I scrape down too. So it depends on the elder that's teaching you. And then you're going to see the living part is the part that you want is your chanshasha or your mitigo sema. So I'm going to take a little bit, and now I'm going to talk to this plant because it's a living being just like me, and it has a spirit, and there's beings that are around it. Like in my I was taught is there's spirits that tend this plant too. So I'm going to talk to this plant and talk to it about its gift. If I was serious about collecting, I would probably go after a nice, smooth piece like this right here. You know, this would be okay, but this would be the best right here. If you get a smooth piece, you're going to get more. But I don't want to collect a whole bunch right now, and the plant is still with its leaves, so I don't want to bother it that much. I'm just going to take a little piece. What I do is I ask them, that's why I'm feeling them right now. When I gather, I always ask the plant if it wants to give, and sometimes you'll get it really strong. No, get away from me. I'm like, okay. So you got to ask and get used to like waiting to see if you're supposed to or not. So just now a bunch of those branches said, no, not me. So then I'll keep looking until it's like, oh, there goes one right here. So this one just showed itself. And this one right here, you could make a rim for a birch bark basket, or you could do all sorts of stuff with that. So normally what I would do, when I was taking some of the leaves off, now I'm gonna scrape the outer part off. Now see how it kind of looks green? That's the part you want. So I'm gonna scrape it even more, and then it looks white. That's the stick part. So this part right here is what you're gonna dry and use. Hey, the wind wanted it.
Shinuden.
Yeah, Shinuden, Miyajigwa. Yeah. So here I am, I'm scraping it. It's that green part that you want. You're gonna need a lot to make it through the winter and to make it through the year. When this is inhaled, it reduces pain. So the 4 different kinds of dogwood that you might use in that recipe, you might have the 4 different kinds of dogwood, and all of them, when you inhale that, it's a way to give medicine into your body. So smoking itself isn't a bad thing. Smoking is a drug delivery system. But we as humans, we love to be addicted to everything. So when you have a cigarette, there's all these poisons and things that are going to kill your body. That's, so if you think of it in terms of anytime you're taking that plant essence in or that chemical essence in, think about what it is that you're taking into your body. If it's like this and you're using it to reduce pain, like general pain, this is like a general pain. The other ones do like stomach pain, head pain. So that's why there's the 4 dogwoods. But it's really mild. It's not a super big pain reliever. There are super big pain relievers out here in the woods or out here in the wilds. This one is not. This one is a gentle, it's gonna relax you a little bit, just a little bit, and do some pain relief. You can make a tea out of it for a liver cleanse as well. But it's a tricky thing because some families are very, very strict about you only pick this after the last thunder and before the spring thunder. So during the winter time when it's bright red and you can find it super easy. So pay attention to your family teaching and do it that way. Another one that people often put in their tobacco blend would be this one right here. In English, this is mullen. And what they use, and see this one's already dying, so I'm okay with this. They use the leaf, and that helps you to cough up stuff from your lungs. Like so often if I'm given a tobacco blend and somebody says, "What's in this?" There'll be this, and there'll be some of this. So some of this, some of this. That's not uncommon to have in a blend. Back in the day, this one right here in Ojibwe, they call it Ojibwe or squirrel tail, same thing. And in English, you call it yarrow. You can use it for a lot of things. Some people will use it as a medicine for fevers or nosebleeds. It's a bit of a styptic. There is a way to use it for coating your hands against heat and fire. So, but some people really, really use this one a lot. Now for me, I can't use this one. So what you have to do is when you're working with plants, get to know the ones that work with your body, because each one of us have different bodies, and you have to find out which ones come to us and work with us. Because even though I truly respect this plant and know that it's a great helper for many people, I can't use this one. So usually I leave it alone. So those are the kinds of things you have to start. If you're going to start spending time out in the woods, and I'd suggest everybody do this, during this time when there's lots of changes going on in the earth, please take some time for you as a human on this earth to be out in the woods. Spend time with these plants. They can calm you, they can heal you. What you want to do is let some of that tension and those fears go straight down into the earth. Let Mother Earth take that. If you know about fertilizer is poop, right? Usually. Mother Earth can take that really bad stuff and turn it into something good. But we've got to give her something that she can use. Don't keep giving her poison. Don't keep giving her insecticides, herbicides, GMOs. You've got to give her some of that stuff that might be bothering you. Just let it wash through and go right into Mother Earth so you can feel some freedom from that. And remember that we're a part of this. We're not separate from this. If we think we can be, we're going to wobble and fall off. That's the teaching. If we think we can divorce ourselves from any of this, we're the newcomers right here. These are our elders. That little frog is my elder. There's been frogs here much longer than human beings. There's been these plants here much longer than human beings. And in the wintertime, you can tell stories. And one of the most important stories I keep getting thinking about this year is that we're the little cranky babies that were sitting there going, give it to me, give it to me. And we're not learning from our elders, the plants and the animals, how to survive on this planet. You know, we're forgetting about Mother Earth and the grandmother spirit that watches over her. So we've got to be thankful for these elders that have put up with our shenanigans and our craziness of we want everything super easy and give it to me right now or I'm going to cry and wet my pants, which is about what we're doing. So we always think that each one of them, every plant, every animal, every insect said, I have a gift, and offered it so freely. So we're so blessed that they're willing to put up with us, but we got to get out of our ego and our addiction to stuff and money if we want to survive. It's not the easiest day to...
I know, it's a little windy.
So pretty soon all the leaves will be gone and it'll be hard to tell. For a lot of people it'll be really hard to tell what's what. So as we look around here, you might look in the back there and you see a growth back there. That's a black cherry tree. And it has black cherries that are ready towards the end of July. So you could probably pick the cherries from there at the end of July. Plus the inner bark is really strong for fighting infections. You've got to be careful with it because it can be really strong, but people use it. That's one of the ones they've been using to prepare the body to fight off viruses.
Noodinensikwe?
Minug. So like if you're from Turtle Mountain, this is what your area is called from. Pembina is referring to this particular gift, the high bush cranberry. So like I said, this one right here is cousins to this. So the genus is Viburnum, high bush cranberry. And you'll see they sweeten up after the first frost. So you'll see they're pretty tart. This weekend I went to get some low bush cranberries that grow right on the ground. So can you see how these seeds are similar to those seeds? Here's the high bush cranberry and the nanny berry. They have the same genus. So this right here, normally you could find this through February and it sweetens up through the winter time. But because the birds don't have much food and the insects don't have much food, they're depending on this. So we need to share. As humans, we're forgetting to share with the insects and the other animals. So these right here, we've got to think about sharing with them. Speaking of, when you're picking, here right here is Waganogun. If you see this, you know that in the springtime, this is going to be a place that you can gather fiddlehead ferns. This is what you're going to look for. And in the springtime, when these are green, they're going to be coming up and curled around like a fiddlehead. And there's old recipes from White Earth of making soup out of these when they're curled up with potatoes. If you got some meat, you can throw it in there, but you boil it up and put salt in there and just give it a little flavoring. So Waganogun in the boob is like fiddlehead soup. So here you see it right here. And the teaching is you count 11 or you count 13 and pick one. So you never want to say, oh, here's me, I'm going to pick all of this. You got to be respectful of it. Because if you keep picking, there won't be any for your relatives in the future. There won't be any for the bears. There won't be any for the deer. They got to eat too. So you've got to be respectful. Count 13, pick one. So you're always thinking about, you've got to leave the plants enough so that they can regenerate. They say if there's less than 100, that they're not going to make it. There has to be at least 100 somewhere. So like for these, it's spores, but usually it's seeds, and you've got to think about the pollinators. You know, if you don't have the pollinators, they're not going to make it either. So if you don't have the insects that can pollinate it, it won't survive. But there is a lot of food that we still don't think of as food. So sometimes we have to get out of our comfort range and think about, this is food, and how can I respect this as food? I need to talk to you all about being respectful of the wild plants, because people will say, oh, it's a herb, it's safe. Not true. There's very, very toxic plants out there. You've got to be careful about what you're putting into your system. You could harm yourself permanently, or you could harm yourself. You could kill yourself if you're not cautious about respecting the plants. This plant right here is known to kill cows and horses. It's one that's toxic, and there are toxic ones all over. Then there's other plants like this one right here. This will really take over. There's different plants that are not native to this land, and they're called alien invasives. So it happens in all of our, what you would call a biome, is that there's alien invasives. Here's a really good example of one. I hate to ever say a plant is bad, but what this plant does, this is Horiolisum. This plant will put out chemistry in the soil that makes other plants die. So it kind of is promoting its own self. So if we look at our native plants, they've been together for thousands of years, and they found a way to get along. They found a way to support each other and not wipe each other out. When new things come along, they don't necessarily know how to act on this land. So sometimes they get really aggressive and they push out the natives. So there's lots of examples of that. European buckthorn really pushes out the natives, and then it just wipes out everybody else other than itself. So it's things to think about. And it doesn't have the berries will give you diarrhea, but you can get diarrhea till you die. So you need to think about what you're eating. Always make sure that you know what the plant is. This plant, like, I will remove it at the farm because where I work, it'll chase away native plants. Through its roots, it'll toxify the soil. And there's different plants that'll do that. There's native plants too that were used as war medicine, like the cattail fluff. If you burst that into somebody's face, then it's really hard on your breathing and your eyes, so it would immobilize somebody. But also say like the acidity of a jack in the pulpit root If someone just ate that fresh, it would tear a hole in their stomach and they would die painfully. So plants are not something just to fool around with. You need to be respectful of them. They're very powerful. Over here, we have one of our old staples. There's a few plants here that are good to think about.
Are those rose hips?
Yes, these are beautiful rose hips. Ghene. That's back in the day they would say a good Ojibwe woman always has her bag of rose hips next to her. So much higher in vitamin C than orange juice. So we would have that, and you can keep it all winter long. There's a nickname for it though, because people would, if you eat the entire thing, then you're gonna get a itchy behind. So, so you break it open, and that's the part you want, right there. Then the seeds, that's the part that makes your rear end itch. But this is the part that's going to taste like a waxy apple. And you can make tea out of that. You could put it in your meat dishes to give it a fruity flavor. So if you gathered these, scoop the seeds out, get a whole bag of that, that would keep you from getting scurvy or any of the diseases that are vitamin C deficiency related. Mm-hmm. You can also get vitamin C from things like cedar tea, some of the pine needle teas, but this is a nice way because you could just keep it all winter and it just dry it. Most of the plants that I gather, I'll put on a paper plate and dry in my room, just on a paper plate, and then save it from there. During the farm season, we pick the milkweed. This is too old now, but if you want to be a seed picker, and we're encouraging young people to learn how to be a seed picker, because what you can do, this is about to break open anyway, you'll see here's the seeds of the milkweed. And milkweed, we know, helps a lot of different pollinators need this. You're going to scoop the seeds off and make sure you release them or plant them. So see those brown seeds? That's what you want. You want to plant those somewhere where they can come up next spring. So you can do that. Just plant them. Could be something we'll dig it up, but we want you all to practice. That's not a good practice what I just did right there. You want to break them apart more thoroughly than that. But when I was little, we did this. My sister and I would plant milkweed seeds for the insects. And one of the teachings that my mom would encourage us was that the little people, we'd say, oh, look, it's a little boat for the little people, Oh. So there's all sorts of different little people in our teachings. You'll hear stories of the Memengwesiwag, but there's other kinds as well. Jabu Wizigan, some people call this, which that would mean it makes it go right through you, which means it gives you diarrhea. But that's because if you're eating it, and the milk, see this milk? If it's milky like that and you eat it like that, you probably will have some diarrhea. But you can use this to suffocate warts too, because warts need air. So if you've got a wart, you keep putting it on there. That they call this latex. It's not really latex, but they call it that. If you do that, you can suffocate out a wart and it can fall off. But some tribes really use this a lot for food. Like the Ho-Chunk folks really use this for food. You want to get the young ones, the new buds. This is too old to have it, but you can use like the freshest leaves and then boil it, pour the water off, boil it, pour the water off. Or when the pods are young, when they're only like this, they're delicious. So just slice them up, you can eat them, or you can boil them, pour off the bitters, or you can use the flowers too. Like some people will stew the flowers, or they'll dip them in batter and fry them up. There's lots of things you can do with milkweed as a food source. So for a lot of these food sources, there's not just one way to use it. If you pick one thing like the raspberries, or the blackberries, there's a perfect example. You can eat the berry, you can use the leaves, or you can use the roots. And you would use that if you had diarrhea. So that'll stuff you up, was blackberry roots and blackberry leaves. So sometimes there's food, sometimes there's medicine, all within one plant. Oh, there's so much here. There's so much that this earth is so abundant and so generous to us. Right here we have anise hyssop, and it has the black licorice flavor. And it was often used, like there was a tea that people would use. I know in the Potawatomi way, the tea was used from this at the end of a ceremony. So if you taste it, you can taste it super sweet. It has the black licorice flavor. So I'm gonna give it to Mindy.
Whoa.
Yep.
If you like licorice.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's everywhere here. As far as wild harvesting it this year was really good, but for people who are growing it commercially, it wasn't doing well. So paying attention to, like, how are things doing commercially, how are things doing in the wild way. Another thing that's kind of nice to see too is, like, you look at this, you go like, oh gee, is that a cherry tree? This is the baby bark of a birch tree. So this is a birch tree right here. But when it's a baby, it's going to look way different than when it's a grown-up. And they're just like us. I mean, I'm sure I looked way different when I was a baby. And trees are the same way. If you can see right here, starting to burst through his baby bark and be a little bit more of an adult. So plants will do that. You can't just assume, well, I know what a birch tree looks like, if you're not used to what it looks like in its different phases.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back here. Well, here I'll show you another. We've been talking only about plants, but when you do plants, you also might notice that there's insects right in with the plants. They're webbed together. So with the plants, for every third bite of food that you have to thank an insect because we're that dependent on insects for pollination. This right here is a tall goldenrod gall, G-A-L-L, but inside is a goldenrod grub. It's a little white worm. And when I was little, we would use these for fish bait in the wintertime. There's the little white worm right here. Our bodies need fat. And nowadays, we've got an abundance of fat. But back in the day, you wouldn't be finding fat unless you killed an animal. So for our cell structures, you need some fat. This was one way you could get a little fat, was through this. So the only other ways would be through, if it wasn't lipids, through the exoskeletons of insects, then you'd have to get it through like a bear, a deer, if they're fat. And from what I've heard this year, the bears are really lean. There's not much fat on the bears this year. So that's one reason we want to make sure they get what they need too.
Rabbit tobacco?
Rabbit tobacco, yep. Crush it and then smell your maple. Did you get the maple?
No?
Try some that's still in the bud form. If you do the buds and crush it and then smell, it's a strong maple flavor. Sometimes you'll walk out in a field and go like, there's got to be a maple tree somewhere around here. And it's in the South, this was an old form of tobacco, an herbal tobacco that was used. Bagan saga, okay? So these are hazelnuts.
Oh,
Yeah. And they're native to this area. I remember as a little girl we would pick these. And they should be ready if the worms didn't get them or the birds didn't get them. So they're smaller than the domesticated hazelnuts, but if you've ever had Nutella or anything with filberts. That's what this is. So those are hollow. So I'm looking for some that haven't been eaten yet by an insect. No. So this is what you're going to see. In the past, I remember one season going through here and finding out of 100 in December, you could still find one or two that had fat and protein nuts, but the insects have gotten these. So I'm going to go check a different spot. This feels like it's red. This one feels like there's a nut in here. I don't know if I don't want you to challenge your teeth either, but when I was a kid, we would crack them open with our teeth. So this is what they're going to look like.
Ooh. Licorice.
Uh-huh. And so what you do is you can take two rocks, or you can take pliers, bagansug. So you might recognize that word. There's a lot of words that we use, like pecan. That's straight up Ojibwe. It means nut, but these are hazelnuts. So bagansug, bagan is nut. So what you can do is once you crack these open, the nut is the inside. You can keep this all winter though. If you kept it in a cool place, it wouldn't go rancid, and you'd have a source of fat and protein. And nuts are really exceptional for a food source. So people would still, you would want to make sure that you had areas where you could gather nuts. One of the nuts that was barely into this area was hickory nuts, and there's a variety of hickory nuts. They were truly valued because they had the fat and the protein in there, and people would trade for hickory nuts. And so here's a good example of a beautiful gifting tree. Okay, you can call it opwaganatig, which means pipewood, would be a definition of it. And the reason why it's called pipewood is that the stems of the sumac are hollow and were often used for making pipe stems. Okij is how you say that in Ojibwe. So to the very top, if you started at the top, the berries do have vitamin C, a little, not a ton, but they have a sour flavor. And you can gather a bunch of that and make tea or seasoning for year-round use. So you can see it up there, the berries. And then the leaves, when they're changing color, some people like sumac leaves in their tobacco mix, their Kenekenic. So that's sometimes in people's tobacco mix. The bark and the roots are diuretics. So there's going to make you pee, like if you need to release some water, if there's water buildup in your system. So this plant is just so generous in its gift. It's giving food, it's giving medicine, it's giving so much to the people. So I know when I was little, my sister and I would make roofing, like when we would make our own little houses in the woods, we would use sumac leaves for roofing because they're so dense and repelled the water. So around here, there's 3 different kinds of sumac that I know of. There's the smooth, there's the staghorn, and there's the poison sumac. But poison sumac is pretty rare, really rare in Minnesota. This is the only area that I know of where you can find the poison sumac. Mindy just asked me a really good question. She asked me about how do you start on your journey to learn to be a part of this? Because it's a beautiful gift. It's a beautiful gift. There's teachings about if you take care of the language will take care of you. Well, if you take care of the plants will take care of you. It's absolutely true. And it's a journey. You're not going to learn it all, bam, like this. You have to spend time with the plants. And they'll tell you stuff. They'll teach you stuff. If you spend enough time with them, you're going to start noticing things that you've never noticed before. And they're going to do this gradual process of teaching you. Like if you see something like this, okay, it's an acorn. But I know like this cap right here, it comes from a red oak. So it's going to be more bitter than a white oak. And I know that Everything likes to eat acorns. I mean, even the people, there's whole tribes that survived off of acorns. So if I was wanting to be around, if I wanted to see a bear or a deer or a wild turkey or blue jays, look for an oak tree. They're all in, everything's all interconnected. So if I spent time around those, eventually I would probably see a bear or a deer or a blue jay or mice or whatever wild animals that are after the fat and the protein that are inside of the acorns, just like us. They need it too. So you start to find these connections. And maybe you think, well, I don't have time to spend out in the woods. It's a way of being, so you kind of have to make time. And maybe you say, oh, gee, I don't know any elders that can help me find this way. One of the ways to get started is to start to ask around, like, do you know somebody that knows language? Do you know somebody that knows how to make weegoob for making baskets? And that's the way, once you find that person, or once you find some people that are knowledgeable, offer them tobacco or ask if you can help them. That's the best way. So for example, I do it. I've always had an elder lady that's my teacher. So right now I have a teacher, and I know where she lives, there's no weegoob. There's no inner bark of the basswood tree for stitching. So what I can do is I can bring her what she needs. And then when I bring her a gift of what she needs, then she teaches me, because this knowledge is more important than anything you could buy. So it's a gift of spending time with an elder. And once they're like, oh yeah, I'll spend some time with you, then you've got a little lifeline to hold on to, and you just like keep going along that lifeline. Oh, I want to learn about this. And it leads to, oh, I want to learn about this. Oh, I want to learn about this. And it's pretty soon your whole world opens up to this other way of being in the world. So once you start learning the language and you start learning, gee, I can't even talk about anything here unless I know how to use a verb that's about living beings, then you start thinking about the world differently. Oh, that's a living being. That's a living being. That little stone is a living being. I have to think about that ant as, I can't think of him as he or she. I have to think of that being as a living being. So you start thinking in terms of that. You sort of start changing your way of thinking. That's what I've always done. Is I've been very fortunate that my mom always told me to say, go help that elder. Go see what she needs. Maybe she needs a ride to the grocery store. Maybe she needs some water. Like, I asked this elder that I truly admire this week, I said, do you need some sage? She goes, I need some sage. So I brought her some sage. And then what she'll do is her gift back to me is teaching. Those teachings are so important. The way to really get started in this, and the way it used to be, is when you were a baby and you came into this world and you were crying, like, wah, wah, wah. They said, Nia is, the way you interpret that is, ne, yow, my body, wah, 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 wah. You're trying to find out why you came to this earth. So there's people, mostly elders, that are namers. And usually you would want to find a namer who knows the language, because sometimes when people give you a name and they don't know the language, you might get a really goofy thing. You want to find somebody who really knows the language. So when you were a baby, you would have someone, usually like an adult, like your mom or somebody, would put up a naming ceremony, and they would give tobacco to a namer. And the namer, your nia wah, would find out who you are. Why are you here? That's what your name is. So when you come here, you'll have a purpose for being here. The teaching is that before you come here, you sit in front of 7 elders and you discuss about, like, okay, you're going to go here and you're going to have, this is what you're going to do while you're there. This is what you're going to learn about. So you make that agreement. You say, I'm going to have that person as my mom and that person as my dad, and I'm going to go to that earth, Oma'akin, and I'm going to learn about this. And I'm going to learn how to help others, and I'm going to learn how to be a helper to the spirits. So that's your agreement when you come here. And then you get here, and oh my gosh, you're a little baby. I'm like, OMG, what do I do with these things? I can't make these things work right. I can't even walk. Oh no. So some people say when you come here and you're crying, like, wah, wah, you're crying to find out, why am I here and how do I get to do my purpose? So as you get your name, it's like the first step in finding out really how to be on this earth. So for example, for me, my name is Little Wind Woman, and my namer found that name. It was her auntie's name. And so for the rest of my life, I have to do her auntie's work. That's my reason to be here. And her auntie taught children and people about plants. She taught people her whole life. So now it's my turn. It takes the ego out of the equation. Hope, this physical being, is no longer important because I'm doing the work of Noodinensikwe, the one who carried that name before me. And someone will carry that name after me. And she may be Noodinensikwe. So you get to be free of, oh, my clothes aren't perfect. Oh, I've got gray hair and I've got a bump on my finger. So you get to let go of that obsession with form because you get to find out why you're really here. And then as you learn, like, oh, now I've got my name. What is my clan? And what are my responsibilities for my clan? Like, oh, gee, I'm a turtle. I'm a snapping turtle. So anytime I see a snapping turtle, that's my relative. That's my relative over there shining on that rock. And I know that one of the gifts of the snapping turtle is the little medicines. So clearly, I'm here to be about the little medicines, So then you know your name, you know your clan, and maybe you've done something helpful for the people. So maybe you're gifted a feather. Now, when you gift that feather is a living being. Maybe you have a different Ojibwe. Maybe you've earned a drum. If you've earned a drum, it's a living being, and you must treat it as a living being. So as you walk through this earth, you're going to come across these objects that are going to be with you. It might be a shishiguan, it might be a rattle, it might be a dewe'igan, your drum, might be your migwanug, your feathers. They're living beings. You can't just say, oh, look at my cool thing. I'm going to stick it on my wall and look at me. I earned one. That's a living being. You have to feast that being. You can't say, oh, 5 years ago I feasted it. Oh my gosh. No, you got to remember to thank it, to feast it. Every plant that I carry, I have to feast. I have to remember this is a living being. Does it still have its gift? And I have to do that several times a year. Like the best times to do it, a good reminder for me is at the 4 points of the year. Like when it turns fall, when it turns winter, when it turns spring, when it turns summer. So if you look at the medicine wheel, it's always reminding us this is a time of year to be mindful that people all over the world that are paying attention to the sun and the moon and the plants, this is a time that they're praying. So if you stand up against your tree, like for me, I will go to the same tree every day and put my tobacco down, and I can watch where that sun comes up, and it goes all the way this way, and then it goes all the way that way, and then it comes back right to the middle. The middle is the equinox. The two ends are the solstices. So like December 21st and June 21st are at both ends, while September 21st and March 21st are right in the middle. So those are good times to remember to put up a feast. And it can be just with your family. This week, one of my students called me because she had earned a feather, and she said, how do I feast my feather? It's like, okay, get your family together, and then I walk through the whole thing about this is how you feast your feather. Now she's going to carry that, and she has to remember to do that for the rest of her life. She might say, oh man, I want to be a wild thing. I want to go messing around with cute bad boys, and I want to go smoking drugs, and I want to do all this crazy stuff. If you're going to do that, you have to put your things away. Give them to somebody who's not doing that, someone who's not drinking alcohol, someone who's not using drugs, because those beings are clear and clean, and they have to be kept clear and clean. So give them to someone who's not doing that if you know you're going down a path that's a rough path. Because that's one of the feather teachings, that when you're walking on that feather road, if you're carrying a feather, if you're being attracted to like, ooh, that looks so cool to get drunk and, you know, or that looks like I'll have more boyfriends if I get high, you know, anything like that, you have to walk your way back to that main vein in the feather and start walking on that good path again. And you can do it. No, there's nobody saying, oh, you're awful, you fell off. Because we're humans and we're going to make mistakes. So go back, get back on that path. And as you walk through life and you're spending time with elders, or you're spending time with people who are knowledgeable, they're going to say, oh, gee, will you be my helper? If you're going to be my helper, I'll teach you these songs. If you walk in this way, if you start being gifted things like, oh, now you have a jingle dress and you can do healings with your jingle dress. If you feast your jingle dress, you got to make sure you feast it, take it, honor it. You know, you've got to make sure that you do that. Don't just put it in the closet and go like, I look cute in my jingle dress. That's not what it's about. You know, this is a healing tool. You know, it's the sound of vibration. You know, ching, 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 ching is a healing sound, because we're all vibration and we're trying to make it right. I mean, even science says that we're really like a vibration of an electron, a proton, a neutron, but what's really that? A puff of vibration. That's all it is. So when you use those vibrations, like the sound of the drum, the sound of the rattle, the sound of the jingle dress, to correct a vibration, you can do that healing work. So it's all part of the same. It's all part of walking on that road. It is hard in this world sometimes to find others that are walking on that road. But when you find them, you'll know it. You'll know, like, this is right. You know, so offer your tobacco, ask for gifts, ask for teachings if you can, you know, and then if they know you're serious, don't just give up the first time like, oh, she was busy, she had to go to the grocery store. Hey, maybe I can take her to the grocery store. Maybe I can walk with her out in the woods. Maybe she needs to go pick this. Maybe I can bring her wee goob, like I think about. Try to listen for what they wish for, those ones that are your teachers. Try to be there with them. So like, for me, I think that way about these plants. If I spend time with them, I can find out what I'm supposed to learn. But I got to get quiet enough to learn. Okay, back to how do you get clear enough to hear? We have some tools. If you're able to go to the Madudu Swan, you know, the sweat lodge, and ask there. If you're able to go to a darkroom ceremony, some healers run darkroom ceremonies that you can get answers through that. If you're able to go to a shake tent and ask questions at a shake tent, there's different ways that you can go through and start to learn more. If you're able to go just to something as simple as a pipe ceremony and listen to what people have to say. Everything around you, it's all teaching. It's a teaching school. Like this earth is a teaching school, really. And your teachers are the plants and the peoples and the animals and the insects. They're all teaching you stuff all the time. It's just how much you're able to pay attention and listen. I hope you get something good out of what I'm saying today. It's a beautiful journey. I know for me, it's not always been easy. I don't ever want to say, oh yeah, this life is a snap, because that poor little baby gets here and goes like, oh my gosh, I can't even talk. I can't do anything. I'm a little baby. But doing what you need to do while you're here it gets more beautiful all the time. So I'm thankful to be here, and thankful Mindy asked me to come out here, and I hope you're able to take some good things away. Don't ever feel like somebody else knows all your lessons. It's all within you. You have it. I don't have it. So keep learning and listening and finding out what you need to know. Ahaw. Mi gwich bizendawiye.
Ya